Without a doubt, Electropylon is the best weapon in Returnal's main game. By default, it's a semi-automatic piece that shoots spikes, which does significant damage over time. It can also stack and link to other targets, amplifying its effectivity regardless of how many enemies we encounter. If our interest with the game is to just finish it in order to understand the story, while engaging its innate difficulty with the least amount of hardship, this is what I recommend as Celine's primary projectile launcher of choice. First off, it doesn't take much practice to handle its capabilities, but at the same time would compel us to improve our accuracy. This is achieved through a strategy of what I like to call the revolver principle. Typically, the Electropylons we'll find out there would have 6 rounds or more in the chamber, with a well-tempered firing rate. This motivates us to consider each shot we take, while having enough allowance for errors. The limitations of such a design is there to our benefit, and not to act as an impedance. With other weapons that have the same functionality, like the modified sidearm for example, hitting with a couple of rounds would not be enough. But since this particular piece does damage per second, a few of those that do connect are already devastating to an enemy. This is a huge advantage over those that need to sustain its fire, like the tachyomatic carbine for example. We can't sprint while sustaining fire, and if we aim down on our sights, Celine will be slowed down even more. Being able to pop off just several rounds and do continuous damage frees our character to momentarily focus on the other 2 important things in combat, using melee strikes and avoiding attacks. The first few chapters of the game are deceptively manageable in terms of its difficulty, but once we get to the second half, the challenge ramps up exponentially, and this is no exaggeration. We'll be doing the same moves we got accustomed to, except a lot more intense. So we can imagine if we have something like the Hollow Seeker equipped. It means our agility is stifled because the nature of such a weapon forces us to be vulnerable a lot longer instead of just a couple of seconds. This necessary requirement for self-preservation is what led me to notice another advantage of the Electropylon. After playing the game for a while, I noticed that aiming down on the sight is essentially just a scoping feature. This means that if we calibrate our aiming sensitivity just right, we can disregard zooming in and effectively just fire from the hip without any penalty to accuracy. Our featured weapon today excels at that, allowing Celine to shoot with ease and shave off valuable milliseconds of vulnerability time even more. It doesn't get any better than that. The only type of this weapon that we should stay away from are those which only holds 2 rounds at a time. This goes without saying, but having to reload every time we shoot 2 consecutive spikes is a terrible setup, and would make fighting large groups of foes unnecessarily more difficult. Returnal is already tough on the surface, so we don't want anything like that, unless we're actively looking for handicaps to add on top of it. Other than that, this is a great piece for anyone who decides to step foot in Atropos, regardless of their skill level. I would not be surprised if this weapon helped out the most number of players to finish it, including myself, and for that, in my opinion, the Electropylon deserves top spot. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that this is the best for the main game, which is true. However, for the Tower of Sisyphus, it's only secondary in my opinion. In the next installment of this series, we're going to talk all about it. But for now, as always, thank you for watching.